From Brandeis University, welcome to Recall This Book, where we assemble scholars and writers from different disciplines to make sense of contemporary issues, problems, and events. Specifically, welcome today to Recall This B-Side, which is a short series of conversations that we undertook as a companion piece to B-Side Books, which is an edited collection out from Columbia University Press this June. So hello, I'm today's host, solo today, John Plotz, and my guest is Pardis Dabashi, English professor at University of Nevada, Reno, co-editor of the forthcoming New Faulkner Studies, and currently at work on a monograph with the excellent title, Losing the Plot, Film and Feeling in the Modernist Novel. So Pardis, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks so much, John. I'm really happy to be here.
Oh, it's so great. I wish I could say welcome back to Boston, where, of course, you used to live, but at least I will say welcome to a Boston-based Zoom room. Okay, so a little bit of introductory business. What I hear you asking is a B-side. Well, basically, it's a book unjustly kicked to the curb or thrown prematurely onto the ash heap of history. So for 3 years at Public Books, I have been commissioning writers to sing the praises of odd volumes that slipped through the cracks. They were ahead of their times or behind their times or just on a different schedule. So it seemed like a good idea now that that series has resulted in this book that is forthcoming to invite a few of the authors on to talk about their choices and what lay beneath them. So Pardis, in that context, thanks so much on the day after Nowruz for suiting up to talk about one of your favorite Iranian novels. So basically, three main questions for you, although I'm sure we'll go down some byways and tributaries. And let me just start out with the obvious. What is your B-side and why did you choose it?
Okay, great. Great question. So my B-side is called, in English, it's called My Uncle Napoleon, in Persian, Daijan Napoleon, 1973 novel by Iraj Pezeshkzad. And I chose it because it is, so I wouldn't say that it's like you ask any Iranian person and they'll know what this novel is. And if they haven't read it, they've seen the really, really, really popular television series that came out in the 70s, like maybe afterward. I guess why I chose it is so that's to say it's in a way it's not a B-side. But in the sense, like for American and just generally European audiences, it is a B-side in the sense that it's not. I mean, I haven't spoken to a single person in my academic life who has read or heard of this novel. First of all, it's one of the funniest books I've ever read in my entire life. It's hilarious, and this is, I'd say, why I chose it. It's like a romp. That's how I would describe it. And it has all the kind of like the formal features of a romp in the sense that it's deeply plotted, like things are happening constantly. It is not at all interested in individual psychology or interiority. It's interested in things happening and things happening at a really high rate of, it's fast. It's a fast novel. Mm-hmm. So things are happening quickly and in a kind of like crescendoed succession. So like leading up to sort of climactic moments of hilarity. So one example of this is there's this joke in the novel that centers around a kind of like language that one of the characters uses. One of the main characters is this kind of trickster figure named Asdollah Mirza, and he's the main character's uncle or cousin. And the main character is a young it's an unnamed narrator. He's a young boy who's fallen in love with his other cousin. And basically the kind of like the through line of the novel is like he's trying to figure out how to end up with her. And his cousin Asdollah Mirza is helping him, but he's a womanizer. He's a trickster figure, and he has coded, like he uses the word San Francisco to mean having sex. Mm-hmm. So like the idea of like going to San Francisco means having sex. So like there will be a number of kind of like episodes in the novel where, like a number of ridiculous things will happen. And then like the climactic moment of the scene is like Astola Mirza like making some claim about either going to San Francisco or having gone to San Francisco
Uh-huh.
or
Uh-huh.
being in San Francisco.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah,
You're
so
making it sound a little bit like Tristan Shandy, actually. Because in a sense, then it is kind of a bit of a problem for the category of the B-side, because the point about the B-side is supposed to be something that, kind of belonged to the world at one point and then stopped belonging. It's like, here's like a book that never belonged to like the world in those terms, because it never belonged to the world of Paris or London or Berlin. And yet also it hasn't stopped being a beloved book in
yeah,
its own world, in
yeah,
its small world. Yeah.
yeah, no, totally. And I have such a wonderful example of this, about the way that this novel kind of is like this cohesive agent for like Iranians, basically.
Uh-huh.
So my parents are divorced, and and they've been divorced forever. And we were at the dinner for my celebrating my having received my PhD.
Uh-huh.
And I think I was actually working on the B-side article for you at the time.
Mm.
And so I was sitting at the dinner table. My dad's to my right, my mom's to my left.
Mhm.
And and I said something.
Somehow I feel like the word San Francisco is not going to be uttered in this anecdote.
Oh,
Okay.
San Francisco. Nobody was going to San Francisco that night. Um, and so I said something like, I was trying to, like my parents get together once every like 6 months or something for something having to do with either me or my brother.
Yeah.
And I said something I was trying to like lighten the mood or whatever. So I said something like, oh, like, by the way, like I'm reading my Uncle Napoleon. I'm like writing a little piece for it.
Yeah.
And there was this silence. And then my mom like cracked a joke. She like made a joke about a line in the novel
Yeah.
that my dad then like finished. And they
Ah.
both started like just cracking up.
Wow.
And they probably hadn't talked about this novel together since the 70s,
That's awesome.
and so that's my way of saying like how much this novel is just sort of baked into
Yeah.
the culture,
Yeah. So did they do that in Farsi or in English?
It did. Oh, it was in Persian.
In Persian, yeah. Actually, you're now at a fork in the road here, because I'm about to ask you sort of our third question, which is, other books you thought about or books you would recommend to people who are intrigued by the idea of my Uncle Napoleon. And I feel like you're at a fork because you could either go down the Persian pathway or you could go down the pathway of like other books, world literature books.
Yeah.
Other books in other literatures that are like this. So
yeah, totally. I mean, well, given this platform, I think one thing that I would love to enter more mainstream conversations in literary studies in English is Sader Hidayat's The Blind Owl. I know you and I have spoken about this.
Yeah.
And it's like there is something kind of too much about it. It's like very dark. I mean, like dark of the sort that is, one wonders, is there anything recuperable here?
Yeah.
But I do think that it would be really interesting to triangulate that novel with others in the modernist tradition. Yeah, to kind of shed light on that work and to see if there's some way that it can be brought into conversation with other texts, particularly.
Would you describe it as a novel of ideas? I'm just trying to give listeners a sense of how.
Yes, a novel of ideas. I think it's a novel that is thinking about, is at least on my reading, thinking about very kind of broad questions of mortality, basically, and a kind of like godlessness, like the state of the abandoned world. And this is kind of why I think maybe one of the reasons why it I don't want to say fails as a novel, because I don't think it fails as a novel, but one of the reasons why it's more interesting maybe theoretically than it is aesthetically, because it's like it's in a way it's almost like reading a nouveau roman by Alain Robbe-Grillet. It's like
Hmm.
you see the theorist at work, you
Hmm.
know, and that's one of the reasons why it's deeply, theoretically edifying to read the Bildungsroman, and the Nouveau Roman, and maybe theoretically edifying to read the Blind Owl. But there's something aesthetically there that you're wanting. So if the Nouveau Roman, like the Alain Robbe-Grillet, let's say like if the Nouveau Roman is thinking through the history of the novel, and seeing itself as an extension of Flaubertian critique of realism,
Hmm.
I think there's definitely a way to think about both The Blind Owl and My Uncle Napoleon as offering two very different but equally interesting contributions to that, like, historicizing of the modern novel,
Hmm.
where My Uncle Napoleon, in a way, is using contemporary Iranian events to look back and, like, really reaching back into 18th century and before. I mean, like, the My Uncle Napoleon is rooted in the humor is rooted in street theater, of uh, Iranian street theater. So it's and also commedia dell'arte. So there's like a whole kind of comedic performative tradition that My Uncle Napoleon is kind of pulling into the history of the novel.
Hmm.
Um, and its levity is markedly different than The Blind Owl, which is a very, very dark, if not dour novel, expressionistic, and thinking through the role of the novel in the abandoned world,
Hmm.
in a very, very different way. So I think that the three of them, I mean, Alain Robbe-Grillet, I should write this paper, John.
Oh
Um,
yeah, you should. Except you need to fit the TV show in there
I
somewhere.
know I have to fit
Yeah.
the TV in. Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. I think that these three, it would be very. I mean, I think this is the way my brain works anyway, and the things that I'm drawn to. I mean, is reflected in what I'm saying here. But I think all three of these texts, or all three of these people, Sadeh Hedayat, Iraj Pezeshzad, and Alain Robbe-Grillet, are thinking through the history of the novel in really interesting.
Mm, cool. Wow. All right. Well, that's an excellent endorsement. And I mean, I loved it. I thought it was a great novel. So I'm
Oh,
so
great.
glad. It was such a great discovery for me. Okay, so I'm just going to say, dear listeners, of course, we hope that you will both read and buy My Uncle Napoleon, and we hope that you will buy the forthcoming B-side books from Columbia University Press. But whether you do or not, we would love to know your thoughts about what makes for a great B-side. So I think probably every one of us has a book or two or three that they would love to dredge out of the depths, becoming, as Hannah Arendt said, a diver after pearls. So, Pardis, thank you so much for coming on with us today. It was a great pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And I should just say quickly that Recall This Book is sponsored by the Mandel Humanities Center. Music comes from Eric Chaslow and Barbara Cassidy. Sound editing by Naomi Cohen. Website design and social media by Nye Kim. If you enjoyed today's show, please do tell your friends about us and write a review or rate us on iTunes or Stitcher, wherever you get your podcasts. And do check out our other Recall This Book episodes, which include Merve Emre on Natalia Ginsburg's The Dry Heart and Caleb Crane on a novel written by a 9-year-old. So from all of us here at Recall This Book, thanks for listening.